Once again, nature extends its filthy, creepy, disgusting tentacles into my production. Welcome back to another turgid episode of Jafro's Untamed Yard. These hideous invaders move in uninvited to rapidly poop a house out of their butts with extreme efficiency. These shifty bastards have insidious motives though. They use their poop house to snare and eat other resident insects. And they do it all without concern for whether or not their victim has made prior arrangements with the landowner to be here. They pay nothing for occupying all the best spaces. For instance, all the pathways into my garage where I make the videos you like watching so much. All over the vehicles I want to work on or want to drive. I can remove and relocate them, but they breed so fast that another one senses an opening and moves right back in, rebuilds another poop house overnight. Damn you, orb weavers. Damn you.
Nope, you can have that truck. Yep. I got a spare. I don't need that truck. Nope. Not. Keep it.
In my shootout video, I discovered one of the Hyundai's problems created by this mismatched combination of an Elantra chassis, Expo minivan front knuckles, and cut turbo DSM springs. My issue's just like bump steer, but it doesn't even need a bump, it just needs the gas pedal. The suspension geometry changes from just trying to accelerate, and it leads to positive camber that decreases the size of the front right wheel's contact patch with the pavement. While I may benefit more from stiffening up the rear suspension and moving weight or ballast around, clearly some things up front also need to be addressed, so we're going to start there. One of those things is how the camber problems with this parts combo were addressed, and what other issues that way it was addressed led to. It wasn't done wrong, but it had unintended consequences. In fact, it's a popular fix, really. You basically wallow out the holes, and after you've got it all lined up right, you weld a washer in place. If you move the bolt holes around on the strut mount, you can change the camber accordingly, but the hole you move has a significant impact on how much room you end up with between the tire and the strut. You can see here the top hole was used, and I don't think it resulted in enough camber really, but using the top hole makes the lower hole the fulcrum point for where the tire begins to lean into the strut. And what I want to do is modify a set of struts on the bottom hole in an attempt to make a little bit more room between the strut and the tire. Because when I tried to use the smallest drag slicks made for a 16-inch wheel, I was forced to use wheel spacers that left me only a few threads on the wheel studs and forced me to use a stupid set of lug nuts that I absolutely hate. I won't rule out a further wheel and tire change in the future. In fact, this is probably going to be one of several videos of how to fix this. But in the meantime, I'm going to employ every advantage that I can get. I've alluded to the Colt and this Elantra sharing the same basic chassis in a few other videos, and it's true. The axle and knuckle dimensions are the same. What works on one chassis will work on the other, so I'm going to practice on a new set of struts and Megan DSM lowering springs that I bought for the Colt. Should the suspension find its way back onto the Colt because I don't have the results I want, well, at least these parts don't go to waste. It would need the same treatment. Don't do this with your springs. It can be dangerous, but I know that I assembled these springs and I didn't have to compress the strut. In a previous video, I showcased these Yoshifab Mirage camber plates. There's a spacer washer that goes in first so that you have room for the pillow ball mounts to fully articulate. Then you put on the camber plate, and a special bossed nut is included in the kit to center the pillow ball onto the strut. These work better on coilovers than they do with the stock strut, but I'm going to test fit them on the Elantra. Fits like a glove. Because I've done nothing with the strut holes at the knuckle, I'm going to go ahead and set the camber as far in as I can go with these big fat factory size springs in here just to see what I can get. I'm just putting the Elantra's old struts back onto the Colt so I can put the car back on its own 4 feet. Once that's sorted, it's time to do the exact same thing on the other side. Harvest the strut. If you do that with a preloaded spring, it's like defusing a hand grenade by pulling its pin. Change out the strut mount. Don't forget the spacer washer. Remove the old strut. And go put my Colt back on the ground. Then install the new strut. And once again, adjusting the camber all the way in. So let's put this thing back on the pavement and take a look at what we've got to start with. It sits lower, about an inch lower. It looks like I've got quite a substantial positive camber problem because of the difference in strut angle between the Expo and the Elantra frames. Pretty easy to see just looking at it compared with the back tire. Passenger side looks like more of the same, but it looks a little bit less extreme. Let's take some measurements to give us a better idea of what we're starting with. I'm just zeroing the angle finder off the front radiator support. This isn't the perfect way to do this, but it'll at least get us in the neighborhood of where we need to be. I'm doing this backwards because I'm placing the angle finder on the wheel facing the other way. That's a mistake, but these measurements are just to figure out which ballpark we're playing in, so it doesn't really matter that much right now. At full suspension droop, I've got 5.1 degrees of positive camber on the driver's side wheel and 4.6 degrees on the passenger side. Most of that camber comes out of the Expo knuckles, but quite a bit is also coming from the suspension being at full droop. To determine how much of it is knuckle and how much of it is droop, we need to put the car back on the ground under its own weight and take these measurements again. It's important to turn the wheel and roll the car around to let all the suspension parts settle. You'll get better measurements that way. With the car on the ground, it's still very easy to see the toe and camber with the naked eye. It really does appear that the passenger side is less extreme than the driver's side. Let's see what the angle finder has to say about that though. On the driver's side, you can see here that we've got 3 degrees of positive camber. That's quite a lot, really. The gauge says 87 degrees, so 90 minus 87 is 3 degrees positive camber. You'll pick up some details about how this angle finder works as the video goes on. Let's check the passenger side though. On the passenger side, we've got 90 degrees minus 88.2 degrees equals 1.8 degrees of positive camber. Well, my eyes didn't lie. It is less extreme. You can't forget that we've got some negative camber added with the camber plates set where they are right now, and it's not enough to fix what we've got going on here, but we'll need to add a little extra once we slot the struts to make up for that. So let's put the car back up in the air, grab the strut back off of here, and do our modifications one wheel at a time. While I'm at it, I'm going to grab the original Elantra strut back off the Colt because I wanted to measure where the bolt holes lined up. Forgot to do that earlier. Well, you can always do it right the second time. You can see where the holes moved in on the original strut. I've got about 16 millimeters from the edge before the hole starts on the original strut, and I've got 11 millimeters on an unmodified factory strut. That means I need to move the bottom hole out at least 5 millimeters on the new strut, maybe even more. I bought some 304 stainless washers to weld into place once I've got it all lined up. I found lots of zinc coated washers that fit a little bit better than these, but you don't want to weld on galvanized stuff, so make sure you get uncoated stainless steel or hardened steel washers to do this. Mine came from Fastenal. I'm going to move the bottom one out on the new struts. Same angle, same approach, but it'll move the bottom of the wheel out instead of pulling the whole wheel in to achieve the same angle. Hopefully that gives me an extra 1/4 of an inch or so that I don't have to use those stupid wheel spacers. You always want to pay close attention to this area of the spring purchase for tire clearance when you're doing this. The more you move the holes to add negative camber, the tighter this area gets. In fact, I had to beat these back with a big ass hammer because the drag slip scrubbed the paint off of the tip of that spring perch right there. But anyway, getting on with it. When I measure the bottom edge of the strut mount to the bottom hole, I only get 8.5 millimeters. That means I need to grind down within 2 millimeters of the edge to get the adjustment range that I need. At least that's according to eyeballing this with my mind's eye. Anyway, we'll see how that turns out, but I'm just going to wallow the holes out with my eyeballs for now. I know the hole on the washer I weld back in here will be round, and it'll be exactly where I need it when I'm done. Looks like I've got 1.95 millimeters left. Looks good to me. Let's flip this sucker over and do the other hole. We're going to do a mock-up, test the geometry, and weld the washers in place with the suspension in the car. So I'm doing a quick cleanup of the areas where I may be welding. And with that out of the way, time to reassemble the suspension for the mock-up. using an angle finder, I correctly zero the gauge facing the same direction that I'll be reading it from. But I didn't need to for this measurement I'm taking right now. I could have just zeroed it on the wheel, pushed the wheel in, and read the result. But because I zeroed it on the radiator support, I have to do math. 84.8 degrees minus 88 degrees is a difference of 3.2 degrees of adjustment. Will that be enough? Well, I've zeroed the adjustment off the camber plate now, and we're going to put this thing back on the ground and find out. Baby steps. I've got all my washers on here and bolted everything down tight at the end of the slot, put the wheel back on, rolled all the stress out, and man, that looks so much better already. The tire's mostly back inside the wheel well. Most of the toe is gone now, you can tell by just looking at it, but the truth is in a cheap $20 Harbor Freight angle finder, so let's see what it says. It says that I've still got 0.6 to 0.7 degrees of positive camber, daggone it. I gotta take it a little further then, so I'm not done grinding. Let's see what it says based off of an angle finder that self-zeros off of the Earth's gravity. It's hard to show you this because the camera's so bulky, but that needle is just right on the right side of that line, meaning that I still have some positive camber. And it looks to be just shy of 1 degree, so at least one result confirms the other. Let's see why I came up almost a degree short of where I need to be. Remember I said baby steps. After discovering that I couldn't correct the Expo knuckle camber solely with the Yoshifab camber plates, I put the camber plates back at 0, and that's where I lost a degree. If I had a narrower front spring and strut, I'd have more room for adjustment with those, but let's see what range of adjustment I'll have at the top with the ones that I've got. One degree. I've got 1 degree of adjustment, so my goal is to aim for near 0 and correct it as needed from there using the camber plates. I might build a ½ degree into the passenger side strut because I know what it does already, but the driver's side, I'm aiming for 0. I measured 3 degrees of positive camber while I had 1 degree taken away by the camber plates, so I'll need about 4 degrees of camber adjustment on the driver's side. Let's see how much these new holes yield. .1 degrees. I'd call that perfect. It's time to bolt everything down tight, ensuring it doesn't move, and I say that because I did move it and I had to go back and fix it again. I did that off camera. You know what this looks like. It helps to use your third hand with the pry bar to keep tension on it while you tighten everything down, but you won't get it wrong if you just measure before and after and double check your work. Now to put the car on the ground and check our work again. Holy cow, that's perfect. 0.1 degrees of positive camber. Did you see the display flip? That's what it does when you cross the 90-degree mark. I'll check it again after a drive, but if I need more, I'll just adjust it in with the camber plate. Using the gravity level, it's dead nuts 90 degrees. Now that I've got the knuckle and the washer situated where I need them, I'm going to weld the washers in place to make the hole on the slot permanent. This is what it looks like beforehand. I took the lock washer off the bolt to give me some more room with the torch, but I'll have to flip the bolt around to weld the other side because of how big the nut is. I also unplugged my car's ECU to ensure it isn't damaged by welding on parts bolted to the chassis, which of course is the ECU's ground. I don't really care about anything else, so everything else is still plugged in. I'm going to tack each side and finish it up on the bench. For the rest of this process, I'll just shut up because it's so simple that I've already explained it. Also, I'm the last person who needs to give you welding instructions. This is structural, not cosmetic. I'm going to grind most of it off anyway, you'll see. Now's my moment of shame where I get to show you the hack I've performed, and all of you can criticize how bad my welding is. Go on, the comments are below, have at it. I'm going to shoot a little bit of black primer on here to protect the bare metal, and after that dries, put it back on the car again. So with the camber plate zeroed, and the car under its own weight, there's ample room between the tire and the strut. It looks fantastic with a 225 series tire here, and it's dead nuts 90 degrees. What more could you ask for? I suppose if I needed more, I've got that adjustment on top. It looks way better than the passenger side wheel that I've yet to touch. So one down, one to go. Let's get a baseline of where we're at and where we need to go for the passenger side. Looks like 88.8, 88.6, 0.5, 0.2, 0.1, heck, I don't know. Let's say 2 degrees. I measured 1.6 before, and if I wanted to build a half degree into the camber, that would be about 2.1 degrees. This one's going to go a whole heck of a lot faster because I'm going to grind it out just like the last one, which should give me more adjustment than I need. Because this side's only half as bad. Heck, I'm even going to carefully mark a couple of guidelines using a poor man's compass, which of course is a roll of tape, just to show you that I can. Now I'm happy with that. Let's see how this one fits. With the angle finder zeroed on the hub, we're shooting for 2.1 degrees. But let's see how much I've got to play with in case I need more. Looks like as much as 3.5 degrees, but I'm going to bring it back down a bit, back down to 2.1. And of course, now that everything's bolted back down, it moved, and I get to do it over again. Not a problem, just takes a second. Looks like I've got it now, and let's check it out on the ground. Perfect. 0.1 degrees with negative camber. I can add the rest with the camber plates if I need to. I'm just going to weld it up right where it's at. Think of the front suspension as a triangle because the wheel is connected to the car at 3 points. There's an upper ball joint which is stationary, a lower ball joint which only moves up and down on a radius with the lower control arm, and then there's a tie rod which can give and articulate with the suspension, but that tie rod isn't connected to the suspension. It's connected to the steering rack. The axle goes through the fat part of the triangle, so if any one of those points is adjusted or moved, then it affects the plane and the axis that the wheel is rotating on. So bump steer occurs when the steering arm operates on a different plane than the lower control arm and the suspension do. If the suspension is compressed and the steering arm pushes or pulls at the tie rod, that results in the car changing course, and that effect is called bump steer. When you consider the size and weight difference between a big honkin' Expo minivan and a narrow little 80-horse compact economy car, you can easily imagine how the same part would fit very differently on both of those vehicles. Even though the Expo knuckles do physically fit onto this car, the strut angles are vastly different, so instead of changing all the camber at just the lower strut mount, I'm spreading that camber adjustment out at 2 points so that I can add a little bit more strut angle by doing it that way. I'm still going to get my half degree or so of negative camber that I was looking for, but I'm doing it in a way that should alleviate some of the bump steer, I hope. Well, I guess we'll see, won't we? One of the main things I'd intended to do by moving the lower hole was to add a little extra gap between the tire and the strut so that I could fit my drag slicks without using wheel spacers. If you were wondering why I didn't have these drag slicks on the car at the shootout, it's because I didn't want to go publicly down a track at 100 miles an hour with only 2 threads holding my lug nuts and my wheels on. Safety first! We took 4 degrees of camber on the driver's side out, so if it's going to rub, it's going to do it over there. This looks great! The extra 7 or 8 millimeters almost lets me get a finger in here. Straight up, no spacer. I'm using the smallest drag slicks I can find, a 24.5 by 8 by 15. It's stretched over a tiny 15 by 7 wheel so that I can fit this tire under the strut, and this is also the only 15-inch wheel I could find that cleared the Expo brakes so that I could even use this tire anyway. So my options are very limited when it comes to putting drag slicks on a Hyundai Elantra. For my next set of tests, I need the ECU plugged back in again. I'm going to wedge my fat ass in here and get this over with. And then I'm going to go over my mental checklist and get it on. The car does veer to the right very slightly when I'm going in a straight line, but that's to be expected. It still needs an alignment after all this work was done to it. Steering felt really responsive. The new struts offer much better damping in the front end. Nothing's rubbing or rattling. The car didn't rock back and forth hunting for a line when I accelerated, and I didn't have to fight the wheel like I used to whenever I'd break traction. After all this experimentation, time, and effort, it feels like I've finally got it sorted out. Looks like I've got 0.9, 0.7, 0.8 degrees of negative camber on the passenger side, and 0.3 degrees on the driver's side. I've got a ½ degree more negative camber on the passenger side wheel. That was my goal all along. The wheels line up on the body as if they actually fit this car's front end, and the car actually pulls in a straight line now? Finally! It was moving the passenger side strut mount in by 5/8 of an inch that finally solved all my problems. I really can't say enough good things about these Yoshifab camber plates, which are intended for Colt Summits and Mirage chassis. It just so turns out that they also fit the first generation Elantras. My tie rods are still good, there's no slop in either one of them, but the boots are in pretty tired shape and leaking some grease. I'd hate to have to replace them after I pay for an alignment, so I thought I'd just go ahead and do a preemptive strike. Now is the point in my video where I could go on to show you how to change the tie rods and how you should count threads and the cool tools and techniques you can use and how to compensate if the replacements are a different length so that you can still safely drive to an alignment shop when you're done. And there's only one problem, two actually. One is that there's already hundreds of great videos on YouTube for how to do that, and the other is that the auto parts counter gave me the wrong parts. Oh well, maybe another time. While the changes I made today had a dramatic impact from behind the wheel, I still have to address means of correcting the weight transfer that occurs on launch so that I can make better use of this newfound front end geometry. I'll do that in another video, but for now I'm happy to at least start off the new year with a win. I corrected 2 of the major issues this car's had since I first got my hands on it. Nobody likes to talk or hear about this adpocalypse business because we all want to be a part of something successful that's bigger than us. But I mention it for context so that I can help you fully understand how grateful I am for every single one of the names you see scrolling up the screen right now. These people, these generous, selfless, philanthropic people, are the ones who've guaranteed that my channel would stay afloat, that my tools could stay current, and they're the ones who made it possible for me to continue making these videos. They ensured that the time I spent trying to manufacture creativity was compensated in some way. When my lighting improves, thank them. When my video quality improves, thank them. When my audio quality improves, thank them. I'm proud of each and every one of their help. If you would like to participate on Patreon, I've included a link in the description. My Patreon service is configured for per video contributions so that if I don't upload, it doesn't cost you anything, and I starve. I don't want even a penny more than you think my efforts are worth. I'm thankful for every contribution, no matter how big or small, and I can't really put into words what a difference all of you have made for me. In my driveway, in my garage, with my ability to be creative, to stay the course, to even my own ability to show gratitude and appreciation for others. Thank you. This has always been what this channel's mission was about in the first place. Now, whether or not you're one of my patrons, please feel free to like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, post video reaction videos, click random things, start pointless arguments, and generally have a good time because all of that stuff really helps me out too. And until next time, stay tubed.